Hello, and welcome to How to Choose Education Loans webinar this evening. My name is Marilyn Cargill, and I'm the Vice President of Financial Aid Services, Marketing, and Research for Vermont Student Assistance Corporation. VSAC, for those of you who don't know, is the agency that was created by the legislature about 50 years ago to make sure that Vermont families had the information and financial aid resources that they needed to pursue education and training beyond high school. So in addition to the financial aid that we administer, VSAC has informational services that include our website, toll-free phone numbers, both of which we'll share with you at the end of this evening, as well as counselors who work throughout the state answering questions for students and families as people begin to consider how they're going to pay for higher education and what higher education they'd like to pursue. Our financial aid programs include, we administer the Vermont State Grant, we administer over 100 different scholarships for Vermont families, and lastly, VSAC, to be completely transparent, has been administering student and parent loans for over 50 years, and that administration includes that we are a lender. But tonight is not about our loans, and that's not what we want to talk to you about. What we really want to do is just talk about loans in general to make sure that you have all of the information that you need to make the right decision for your student and your family when you begin to look at loans. We're going to handle questions in a couple of different ways. So if you are on the Zoom meeting tonight, you can type your questions right into the Q&A box, and we will try to answer those while we are live. And if we are unable to get to your question, we will give you, as I mentioned, the email address and a toll-free number so that you can send those questions directly to us. If you are joining us tonight through Facebook, please type your question into the comments section. We have someone that will be responding live to those questions, and some of them may make it onto the Zoom meeting as well. The very first thing I'd like to do is introduce you to our two experts this evening. Joining us tonight is Deborah Lesser and Greg Davis. Deb Lesser has been working at Vermont Student Assistance Corporation for about 35 years, so she is a wealth of knowledge about paying for higher education. And Deb is the manager of our loan origination system. Deb is also, and perhaps even more importantly, the mother of 5 college students. So she knows how this works both personally and professionally, and really will be able to answer a lot of the questions that I'm sure you have this evening. Greg Davis is the Director of Financial Aid for Champlain College. He is also the past president of the Vermont Association of Financial Aid Administrators. Greg has been working in higher education for over 20 years at 3 different colleges, and again, is a wealth of information. So don't hesitate to put your questions out for Deb and Greg to be able to answer. And certainly on any type of a webinar or any type of training, it's a lot easier if you have questions than if we're just talking to you. So please feel free to ask us anything that we can answer for you tonight. So we're going to run the presentation this evening, this webinar, in 2 parts. Deb is going to start, and she's going to talk to you about how to compare and choose a loan. She's going to talk to you about the impact of interest on borrowing and repayment. She's also going to talk to you about the ways to minimize the impact of borrowing long-term, because as you know, loans get paid back over time. And so it's not just what happens in the years that your student is in school, but it's the years after they've graduated that you care about. Greg is going to transition us into a counseling session. He's going to explain to you how to determine what you need to borrow, how to prioritize your aid, and what tips to keep in mind when you're considering loans. The first thing though, before you ever consider loans, the very first thing you should all do is access any free money that you are eligible for. And the way that you access free money is by filling out the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, and the Vermont grant application. those two applications will open up federal aid in the form of loans and Pell Grants, institutional aid, as well as the Vermont State Grant Program and a number of the scholarships that we administer. So you always start there, but once you've done that, then it's time to begin to consider the loans. And Deb, can you get us started with the types of loans and how to compare them?
Yes. So there are two broad categories of loans: the federal education loans, and then there are the non-federal education loans. We're going to start with the federal education loans. Those are loans from the Department of Education. They will be on your award letter that you get from your school, and they will be listed as the Student Federal Direct and the Federal Direct Plus loan for parents. The school will guide you through how to apply for those loans by signing the promissory note and doing your entrance counseling. But the school will absolutely work with you on getting those processed. The federal education loans, there are two types of those. There are student loans and there are parent loans. The Student Federal Direct are subsidized and unsubsidized. And you should always take those loans before you accept any other kind of loans to borrow, because those have some decent interest rates, and they don't require payment until 6 months after school. And there are other options, repayment options that go along with those. The subsidized loan is primarily for students with a greater financial need, and there's no interest that's accruing on those, so no payments during school. There are also unsubsidized loans, and those, the interest is accruing on that even though you're in school, but there is no payment required while you're in school. The Federal Direct Parent Loan is another kind of an education loan, federal education loan. Those are for students of undergraduates. There is a credit check that goes along for that. The parent has a credit check that is performed. And you can borrow on those the cost of the education minus the financial aid that you're receiving. And that's the maximum that you can borrow. The other broad category of student loans are the non-federal education loans. They're called alternative loans, private loans, and there's all kinds of lenders and all kinds of brand names that go along with those loans. You can get them. There are some non-federal loans through your school, through nonprofit agencies like VSAC, other lenders and credit unions, and likely they are going to require a cosigner. So typically that loan is taken out in the student's name, and there is a cosigner on the loan. We generally find that mom or dad cosigns on the loan, but typically any adult could cosign on those. But remember that a cosigner on those is equally liable for the loan, and they agree to make payments on the loans if the borrower doesn't. And in some cases, it's the cosigner's credit that is used in order to make that loan. The important part here, though, is that non-federal loans are not equal. They have different loan terms, different interest rates, and different benefits and repayment options. So it is very important that you compare all your options, understand the cost and the terms of the loan, and remember, it's your choice to accept all or some of those loans offered in your award letter, and you can shop for other lenders.
So Deb, we've got a couple of questions that I'd like to put to you and Greg. First of all, the first one is, they ask for the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized, which you just explained, which is lovely. But is it only one per year issued from the feds, or can you get more than one loan if you need to? And then that same person is asking, the financial aid office at the school suggested that you take one loan, don't apply for two each school year. Do you guys agree with that?
The loan is really driven according to loan limits. So you could take a subsidized loan for the fall semester and then take another subsidized loan for the spring semester, but it really doesn't make sense to do that. It is most usual that one loan is taken out for the year, and there is a loan limit on it. Depending on which grade level you are in school, there is a loan limit on it.
Greg, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Correct. And in regards to whether or not the family is talking about a private loan in two loans, I do talk with families sometimes, and they think there's a benefit to applying once in the fall and once in the spring semester. And I typically just let them know that the interest doesn't start accumulating until the loan's actually been dispersed. So it's fine to do a full year loan because you're only paying for the interest on the loan part that's been dispersed. And I always say you never know what might happen. And if there could be an issue later in the spring semester that could impact your credit, you might see yourselves facing an entirely different interest rate, origination fees, and things like that. So I always recommend to families to apply for the loan for the entire year all up front.
Okay. And Greg, are the federal parent loans always better than a private loan?
Not always. It's because the federal Parent Plus loan has an interest rate that's set, and it's established for the entire year. It's depending on a family's credit score and things like that, they may actually qualify for an interest rate that is better than the Parent Plus loan, the federal Parent Plus loan. So I always advise families to really do what Deborah was talking about before and shop a little bit and to see if what's the best route for the family to go, whether it be a plus loan or an alternative loan or a combination of both. It all depends on the family situation.
And the last question I've got right now is, is every year a new loan? So you don't apply for 4 years worth of loans, 4 years worth of education in one loan usually, I think, but I'll let you answer that. And if someone is interested in a federal parent loan, where do they apply for that?
So typically, yes, every academic year is a new loan. In regards to private loans, there are a couple lenders that are doing a 4-year loan option, but there's only a couple that are doing that right now. But in regards to the federal loans, yes, every year is a new loan. That's because it goes down to eligibility and the filing of the FAFSA and things like that. So we in the financial aid office have to review it every year to determine how much you're eligible for. And my apologies, I forgot part 2 of the question.
Where do they apply for their federal parent loan?
Thank you. It's just it's the federal website, studentloans.gov. They'll sign in using their FSA PIN as a parent, and the student completes their loan document signing in with the student FSA PIN number.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, Deb, go ahead.
Yeah, so as a parent, I just want to clarify this, that while it is different federal loans for each year and the school is certifying it 4 times in theory for a 4-year school, there is a master promissory note for the federal loans that the customer, the borrower or the parent, student or the parent, completes one master promissory note for those 4 years. It's the school then that certifies it 4 times and makes 4 loans on that one note.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, just to add with the plus loan, because our families do this all the time, there is the plus loan application they have to do every year. Master promissory note is good, but with the plus loan, you do have to apply every year.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so Deb, can you talk to us a little bit, when people are trying to compare and choose education loans, what are you suggesting to them?
Well, first of all, remember that all loans do have interest rates. They all have requirements to repay them. It's the details of how that rate is determined and what those repayment options are that really make a difference. So there's 2 things. First, you have to think about what is it that you need in a loan? Is it a cash flow issue for you that you certainly can make those payments while in school and it's simply a cash flow? Or it would be difficult for you to make payments while the student is in school, and so you want some kind of a deferred repayment option on your loan. So you have to think about what it is you're looking for. And I'm going to say this again, you're going to hear this as a common theme. Be sure to take those federal student loans first because of the interest rate and the benefits that they have, the repayment options. include things like you pay based on your income, or if you have financial hardship, there are deferments available for those. So once you decide what you and your family need for a loan, then you have to start making some choices. You have to look for the lender that you want to apply to and to accept their rates. We call it that you should be shopping. Look for the terms, the rates, and compare them to the Federal Plus loan. And we say that because there are some loans that you can get that have a lower interest rate than the Federal Plus. So you want to be careful about that. So interest rates. There are fixed rates and there are variable rates, and you know that if it's a variable rate, there is a chance that that interest rate will go up and you'll end up paying more on that loan. You'll also want to know, how is the rate determined? What are they looking at to determine your interest rate? There are a lot of lenders who use your FICO score, and I just want to say that there are hundreds of different ways to pull a FICO score. So even though you pulled yours on one of those little websites that says your FICO score is 750, when a lender pulls it for purposes of student loans, it may be different. And it's just like an auto loan. They're doing the same thing when you do an auto loan. There are different versions of it. So be careful of that. The other thing that you'll want to know is if the rate may be tied, the interest rate may be tied to the repayment option that you choose, or there may be other ways that that lender is looking at that, determining the interest rate. Most of the non-federal loans have a fee. It's very common to charge an origination fee. The difference here is that the fee is either added to the loan amount that you need, or it's deducted from the loan amount. So you want to be careful on what they're doing with that fee, so that you don't, in some cases, if they deduct, you may find yourself a little bit short, you know, a couple $100, $1,000 to actually pay the bill. So you want to be aware of that. There are many repayment options out there. You'll want to know when the repayment is supposed to begin on the loan, what the monthly payment is, the number of years that you're going to be paying the loan. If there are any deferments or delay in payments, if you go back to school or financial hardship, any of those things you'll want to consider. The other is other benefits. What are the other things that lenders are offering to incent you perhaps to take a loan through them? There are options for paperless processing where you might get a little discount on your interest rate. There are online payments that, again, if you do it online, they'll offer you a little something. There may be a cosigner release. So as I said before, the majority of loans have a cosigner, a credit-worthy cosigner on those loans. And there are some times when that cosigner can be released, like when there are enough on-time regular monthly payments made, then the cosigner can be released from that loan. And another thing you'll ask about is what happens to the loan if the borrower dies or the student dies or becomes permanently disabled. We don't like to think about those things, but it's a reality. Is the loan going to be written off, or does the estate have to pay for it?
We've got one more question that just came in. When you shop around, will this require multiple credit checks and have a negative impact on credit score? And I believe that we have heard and we have seen that as long as they are looking for a loan in a relatively brief period of time, so if over a week or two period, they've looked at 3 or 4 different student loans or even 5 and 6, that it really doesn't impact their credit score because the credit agencies are expecting families to shop. If, however, they get outside of a window and they continue to go out and shop, so maybe they've taken 45 days or 60 days, then you might see some type of a ping. Is that what you are experiencing?
That is what we have seen, and that is what the people that we work with on credit have told us. So that is how we counsel that if it's within a certain window of time, and each lender will have a different window of time, that it would not impact your credit score.
Okay, great. And Deb, could you talk a little bit more about how interest really impacts these loans? Because I know our parents probably really get this, but if we have any students who are on, we frequently talk to students who don't understand why they owe more when their loan goes into repayment at the end of their senior year than they did when they borrowed it as a freshman. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the interest on loans compounds. So briefly, if your loan is $1,000 and you have interest that needs to be paid of $50 a month, I'm making that up, I don't know if that's right, $50 a month, and you don't pay it at that time, then it won't be long before you owe $1,050. And then the next time you look, you're going to owe $1,100. And every time you don't pay that interest, it adds to the principal of the loan. And so in the end, you're owing more than what you took out. So it really is cost effective for you that if you can do it, at least pay the interest on the loan. This slide here shows you some differences in interest rates. This is based on a $15,000 loan, and it's paid over 15 years. At 4%, your monthly payment would be $111. And over the life of that loan, over the 15 years, and this is assuming that you have made those payments on time and the full payments and have not delayed at any point, in the end, you're going to owe almost $20,000 on that $15,000 loan. And similarly, at 7%, $135 monthly payment, and you're going to end up at $24,000, and 9%, I can't see all of that, but I think it's $27,000 that it ends up. So, you know, if you look at those interest rates and compare, look at 4% compared to 9%, and there's a $7,400 difference in those, in what you're going to pay back on that loan. So it really is in your best interest to find the lower interest rate and make those regular monthly payments, even the interest perhaps while you're in school if that's required.
Great. So Deb, what are some of the pitfalls that families can bump into when they're borrowing student loans?
The teaser interest rate is number one. Be mindful of this. We have customers who call us regularly and tell us they've applied for a student loan through whatever entity, and they thought they were going to get a 4 or 5% or maybe even a 2.99% interest rate. And by the time they complete that loan application and their credit is pulled, they're finding out that their interest rate is really 9%. That however that lender is determining the interest, that customer's rate is now going to be 9%. So here's a very, very important part. If you don't like it, stop it. You can cancel the application, you can withdraw the application. Typically, the website that you're using will have a withdraw button or a cancel button. You click it and you're done. And if they don't, call the lender and say, I don't like that, that's not what I expected, and get out of that loan. Remember, this is all your choice. The other thing to be mindful about is the loan amount and the term of your loan. And we've been saying that right along through this. Always look for that good interest rate. Don't borrow more than you need. And look at the term that is going to be, the duration of the loan, because you know that the longer the term, the more money you're paying.
Great. Greg, I have a couple of questions that have come in for you. Under the master loan, the master prom notice, I believe what they're asking about, is the interest rate locked for the entire time?
So with the federal loans, the interest rate is set every year, and then that loan would be under that interest rate. Every year, the interest rate changes. So we like to say that it's fixed, but variable, we joke about in my office. So every year it's a fixed rate. Life of that loan, it's good to go. You just have to know that every loan you take out every year is going to be a different interest rate.
So even though you're only signing one prom note, you're not signing a prom note for a particular interest rate. You're signing a prom note for a federal loan, and then that loan has an interest rate attached to it.
Correct.
Okay. And then the next one is, what factors are considered to determine the federal direct loan being subsidized or unsubsidized? Why wouldn't it just be whatever the amount was remaining as a balance after the grants and scholarships had been applied?
So this goes into how financially it's calculated. So there's, you'll have a cost of attendance that what it is to go to school. It includes what you think about tuition fees, room and board. You take out, and then when you file the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, it's going to give you a number that's we call the EFC, the expected family contribution. So that cost of attendance less the EFC gives you a need component. Then take out those scholarships that you're receiving and the other free money that you're receiving, like a federal Pell Grant or a VSAC grant. If you then still have remaining need, we in the financial aid office can award you a subsidized loan. If you don't have remaining need anymore, that's when we would award you the unsubsidized Stafford loan. It comes down to that need component of federal aid.
Right, and it can't be the entire amount, because I think Deb mentioned earlier, there's a maximum amount you can borrow based on your year in school. Is that also correct?
Correct, yes. First year students, we can only award up to $5,500 total.
Okay, great. So Deb, can you just tell us a little bit about how you counsel students and families to minimize debt?
That's actually a nice segue, because one of the first thing is don't borrow 100%. Look at your free aid first, and then minimize your expenses. And here are some things as a mom that we did with our 5 kids. There are books that you can buy online. There are websites for that. You buy used books instead of going to the bookstore and getting that brand new book. You get laundry detergent when it's on sale at Target. Use your coupons. You don't have to use the laundry detergent that is in the area at the school. Buy whatever groceries that you have or want and get them at a grocery store and not from the campus bookstore. There's plenty of ways to minimize your expenses. Each school puts in a total amount of expenses they expect for a student. And, you know, that could be, making something up again, $1,000. But if you can go out and shop and get those same items for $400, you just put $600 in your pocket. Remember to stop the application if that interest rate isn't what you expect. That's extremely important. Don't think that just because you've gone through the process that you have to keep that loan. Compare the loan options. Consider what it is that you need as a family. Are you interested in the fees, the way the fees are charged, added or deducted? What are the fees? What are the benefits on that loan? Any repayment options? Consider all of those things before you sign. Consider the repayment options that are there, that if you find yourself in a difficult time and can't make payments, contact your lender. It's very important to keep in contact with your lender. And one of the things at VSAC that we have, we call them loan coaches. And we take phone calls from anybody. We don't care if you took the loan from us or not. We're still going to be there to offer advice to you and walk through things that you don't understand, that your lender may not have been able to communicate well to you. We are there to help, and we don't care where you got your loan from. Remember to pay your interest while you're in school, because that would be the less in the overall debt that you will have in the end. And one of the biggest things, you're in control, and you take your federal student loans first, determine what you need in loans, and then you shop for them.
Great. So Greg, I'm going to transition to you now. I'd like to just describe a typical family and have you tell me how you would counsel this family. So Scott and Martha have 2 children. Their oldest, Sam, is looking at your school for this fall. Dad, Scott, teaches math at an Addison High School, and Martha is an ER nurse at Porter Hospital. They've received an award letter, and they're waiting to meet with you to make sure they understand what they've been offered and to ask what options you have to help them come up with the rest of the money they think they need for Sam's freshman year. So what would you tell them?
Sure. So this happens with a lot of financial aid offices, and we try and get these meetings as much as possible with families, you know, because we love to review these numbers with them and make sure they're comfortable with the overall cost of sending their child to college. So in this example, we're just going to use some simple numbers here. Tuition fees, we're going to use as 20,000. The room and board costs would be 10,000. So this would be your bill charges would be 30,000. I mentioned it briefly, and as did Deborah, you know, colleges will have a total cost of attendance, and those things include non-bill charges like books, supplies, getting to campus, setting up your dorm room. You know, so when I talk about a family first, I set them up with the bill charges for $30,000, and then make sure we keep in mind those unbilled charges. Sam's going to receive $15,000 from the college, and then he also is eligible, like I mentioned before, as a first-year student for up to $5,500 in the federal student loans as a student. These funds are guaranteed. So his unmet cost at this point in time is $9,500. So what I would typically do is go through the family's financial aid award and make sure they understand the sources and the types of aid that they're receiving. So the first thing we typically talk about would be the sources of free money that they're going to get. And then, so the free money would be federal grants as determined from the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA form, and then state grants such as the VSAC grant. You know, so that's where we always recommend to families, especially the first year, complete the FAFSA, complete the VSAC grant, establish your eligibility, and make sure you're qualifying for all the free money that you can. Then make sure we review the institutional scholarships and grants that we award. The difference between those is typically grants are need-based and scholarships are merit-based, but it's all free money that the college is awarding. And then outside scholarships that the student might receive from their high school, from private organizations, from things like Boy Scouts, churches, and stuff like that. All that is money that's free that the family won't have to repay. The next thing I review with them is what we've awarded them in loans, the money that they will have to repay. Again, stress, you know, take out that federal student loan first. The interest rates are fixed, the repayment terms, the forbearance options, the deferment options. There's just a lot of good reasons why you should always consider the federal student loan first when you're calculating those costs. And then that's when the conversation would start about whether or not to use the Federal Parent Plus loan, whether to use a private loan. Some lenders, some schools are starting to offer what's called income share agreements. These are really the same thing as a loan. What it is you agree to repay a certain amount over a certain amount of time with interest rate. The repayment terms are typically tied to what you're earning post-graduation, but they behave the same as a loan. So that's why I always include them in the category of money that you would pay back. And the last thing I always review with the family is what I like to call the pizza money. This is typically student employment federal work study that gets awarded to a student. I call it the pizza money because just like any job, depending on how many hours the student works every week, they get a paycheck, and it's up to them to use that money accordingly. Use it to go down to Church Street, get some pizza, hang out with your friends, go to a movie. Some students will save that money up and they'll pay for their books next semester. So once I have a good conversation with the family and make sure they understand the types of aid they're receiving and where it's coming from and whether or not they're going to have to come back, it comes to that conversation. And in this scenario, we talked about the unmet cost of being about $9,500. Sure.
Greg, a question came in that said, beyond tuition, what else can be financed? Can travel expenses, personal expenses, books and supplies, can they all be part of the budget that determines eligibility for a student loan, whether it's private or federal?
Yes, definitely. That's that cost of attendance figure. And so that's why it's always important to understand you can borrow above what your billed charges are after other sources of aid, but only borrow what you need. But definitely, yes, up to what the college establishes of their cost of attendance, we can certify in private loan eligibility.
Okay, and so we also had a question asking us, could we explain again the difference between a fixed rate loan and a variable rate loan?
I can take that one. The fixed rate loan is typically, well, I don't know that, is a interest rate that you have for the life of the loan. So you apply for that loan today and you have a credit check pulled. It's there's a final approval on that loan, and then that interest rate is set. And it will not change for the life of the loan. For as long as it takes you to repay that loan, 15 years, it's still that interest rate. There are other loan types that have a variable rate, and that means they may set you in at a low interest rate to get you in the door at 2.99%. And then next year, it's going to bump up to 3.25%. The year after that, the economy really tanked, and so it went up to 6%. It can continue climbing. It can go back down. So you're bargaining, what do you think is going to happen to that interest rate over the life of the loan? It can go up and it can go down. Historically, we've seen it go up.
Okay, so I've got another question for Greg. My award letter is an award from the school, a university grant, and a line for sub and unsub loans. Everything else I need to take out another loan for, is that correct?
So that's where the conversation with the family starts. And so I start to figure out and find out if they have private resources. Some families have what's called a 529 savings plan, college savings plan. And then or they may just have personal income, $400 a month. Most colleges offer a monthly payment plan. So if you can afford it per month, you can make a monthly payment plan. But ultimately, yes. So after that cost of attendance figure, whatever is left over after institutional grants, federal, state grants, and the what you can borrow in the federal student loan program, that is what's left to finance. Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be a loan. It could be coming out of their savings account. It could be coming out of some other asset. It could be maybe private scholarships if some came in after the award letter had been determined. But mostly it's going to come, if they need to come up with all of it through another means, we're talking about financing a loan.
Correct. Yes. And for that individual, I'd make sure they reach out to their financial aid office or their student accounts office. We have both offices can work with families to figure out what their final balance is and then discuss with them the ways to finance their education. Either office can work with them to get to that bottom line.
Perfect.
Yep. And so a lot of conversation with the family will come to me and sit there and say, why the plus or why a private alternative loan? And then if they decide to do the private alternative loan, who do I use? And so like Deborah was talking about before, it's looking at what you get for an interest rate and what those repayment terms and what those the fees might be, the difference between what the Parent Plus loan is and then what the private alternative loans would be. And then it is also to the consideration of the family who's going to repay that loan in the long run. The student is the primary borrower on a private loan, typically, although there are now parent private loans. But the parent's always the co-signer. So I'd say to the families, make sure you understand that with the Parent Plus loan, the parent is the co-signer for the life of the loan. With a private loan, the student is the primary borrower. And as Deborah mentioned, many of them now have co-signer release options. So once the student gets out of college and is making an income and can show that they can pay the loan off themselves, the parent can come off the loan. So a lot of times parents like that. There are times where the family decides, let's say that they owe $10,000, they'll sit there and they'll do a plus loan for $5,000 and they'll do a private loan for $5,000. That way everybody has responsibility repaying the loan. I also like to make sure families think about the 4-year cost. The fact that, if it's a bachelor's degree program, 2 years cost if it's an associate's degree program. And I'll work with them to do a budget and factor things out so that they can really consider what the amount they're going to have to borrow over the lifetime of the education. And then as that other individual asked about, there's the additional expenses of study abroad. And you need to factor those in when you're making this decision whether or not to take a plus loan or do a private student loan. When it comes time and the family has decided that they are going to go the private student loan route, they should check with their school. Some schools have what are called lender lists. And all this is the school has worked with these lenders. Most of the times the school has these are the lenders the students have used in the past. It's just a way so the student can see some of the information quickly and still shop around. Make sure you're doing your due diligence and looking at things. I always say to families, make sure you apply to at least 2 lenders, and then that way you can see the competing interest rates you qualify for and the fees that you qualify for. I also highlight to families the fact that agencies like VSAC, that are state agencies, look at them, consider them, especially if you're coming from out of state. If you're coming from out of state and going to a Vermont school, you can apply for a VSAC loan. Conversely, if you're a Vermont resident and you're going to a different state, sometimes you might be able to apply for that state agency as well, although you can also still apply for the VSAC loan. But I like to stress them to make sure you look at a couple of loans, you consider them just to make sure you're getting the best interest rate and getting the best repayment terms that you can.
Okay, so we've got a lot of questions that have come in. So one is, you've mentioned paying interest while in school. Should we be paying the interest on the federal loans as well as on the private loans?
Yes. If you can. The subsidized student loan doesn't have interest accruing on that. The federal government is actually paying that. So you don't have to worry about that. But the unsubsidized student loan, there is interest accruing. And if you can pay it, that would be ideal, because in the end, the total loan cost is going to be less. But you don't have to if you can't do that. The parent loan, the federal direct parent loan, you do start making full payments on that as soon as it's dispersed. You start, actually, I think it's after the second disbursement, full disbursement. Yeah.
Yeah, all I would add is to the point, if you can't pay off all of them, the interest on all of them, pay the interest on the one with the highest interest rate. So just
Yep.
find the loan that has the highest interest rate that is accumulating at once disbursement occurs, and that's the one you want to focus on.
Greg, that's great advice. We've also had a number of people, Greg, ask if you could repeat the website for federal student loans. Where do they go?
Sure, and I'm glad they're asking, because after I said it, I remember that the government went through and redid a lot of their websites. It's now actually studentaid.gov. If you did what I said before with studentloans.gov, it'll direct you there, but the correct one is studentaid.gov, and that'll take you to all the information about federal student aid.
Great. So now we have a question. Do you have any specific advice for a place to start for someone starting a graduate program? Are the steps generally the same minus the parental information? So I'm going to start with the grant side of things at VSAC, and Greg, let you step in on some of the schools pieces.
Sure.
So most graduate students do not qualify for state or even the federal state grants or even the federal Pell Grant. You still start by filling out your FAFSA, and then you will want to fill out any application that your school requires you to fill out. Graduate students do have the ability to borrow higher amounts than undergraduates do, but I'm going to let Greg pick that up because he knows more about that than I do.
Sure, yeah, the borrowing limits for graduate students are much higher than they are for undergraduate students. They're actually up to $12,500. And then the other thing is there's what's called a graduate plus loan now. So similar to how a parent can borrow for their undergraduate student, their dependent undergraduate students, graduate students by themselves can qualify for a plus loan that will go up to their cost of attendance. But as you pointed out, make sure you check with the financial aid office of the school you're working with to complete all the applications. Depending on the school, some of them have scholarships for grad programs. And so you want to qualify for all the free money that you can.
Greg, another question that we're getting is, the question is, if the unsubsidized loan accrues while you're in school, let's say for 1 year, how much interest would it total? But that's going to depend on how much they borrowed and the interest rate the year that they borrowed it. But aren't there tools online that students can go to and plug in their loan and their interest rates and begin to see how the interest will capitalize?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely go to most banking agencies and they have simple interest rate calculators. I want to say, don't you at VSAC have one? I wasn't positive, but yeah, so you can definitely do a simple compound interest calculator and see how that would impact you. trying to think of the one we definitely have one that we send people to from Champlain College. It's just blanking my mind right now. I can't think of who it is.
You know what? That's okay. We can post this. We're going to post this webinar on our Facebook page and a few other places. And if you can come back and tell us what one you recommend that families use, we'll post that as well so people will know.
Definitely.
Thank you. So another question. My son was awarded $2,750 of federal unsubsidized loan for fall 2020. In planning for the private loan amount for the full academic year, will he receive another federal unsubsidized loan notification for spring 2021, or do we need to process some sort of application again?
You wouldn't, for the federal loan, you wouldn't need to. The FAFSA is good for the entire what we call the 2021. So fall of 20 and spring of 2021 would all be under that FAFSA. It sounds like they've just done the disbursement into two parts. And so he would be eligible for another $2,750 in the spring semester.
Thanks, Greg. Deb, I think you started this conversation earlier. Is FAFSA loans the federal sub and unsub loans, or is FAFSA used for other loans as well?
FAFSA is used for all of your financial aid that you're going to receive. So the way that this works is you fill out the FAFSA form by going to studentaid.gov. You set up your credentials, you get in, you can retrieve, there's a button that can retrieve your taxes that you need. It populates the majority of everything for you. That gets submitted to your school, and if you're a Vermont resident, it will automatically go to VSAC. From that point on, that FAFSA, federal, what is it, Greg? Free
application for federal student aid.
There it is. That is the application that starts everything. And from there, you will have other applications that get paired up with that FAFSA information. So the FAFSA is not a loan, but rather it's a vehicle to get the loan and other financial aid that you receive. It's the federal direct student loans that we were talking about.
Okay, so I've got one more question I want to put forth. This one reads, my wife and I have some financing needs hitting at exactly the same time as our child is going to college and exploring what we're talking about here today. We want to take out loans for other purchases and a cash out home equity loan that would influence our debt to equity ratio. Our concern is whether or not accessing this financing could jeopardize co-signing on our child's student loans. Is this a justified concern? It seems like there may be several options for loans that precede parental involvement that requires and may be influenced by available credit. Thoughts?
Yeah, this actually happens quite often when we're meeting with families. People are refinancing their homes, buying new homes, changing, moving, things like that. I always, start off by saying I'm not a financial advisor, so I can't completely say what they should do, but definitely things to consider. And applying for private loans could impact your credit score, could impact your ability for the other types of things. Maxing out debt to income can impact the private loan availability, which could impact your interest rate. Probably wouldn't decline you for the loan, but would probably change the interest rate the private lender is going to offer you. When the timing seems like they might be done in August, and it's a question of how soon afterwards should they apply for the private loan, I'll work with our student accounts office to see if we can give an extension on the due date of the loan and stuff like that. And that way they can take care of all the personal stuff first and then do the private loan once they know they're clear of those things. And then sometimes it might be a reason to do the Parent Plus loan, because the Parent Plus loan is really just looking at your current past 90-day borrowing history. So they're not looking at the debt to income ratio and things like that. But understand, once we disperse that plus loan in the fall semester, it'll show on your credit history. And so that's where it just comes down to a timing thing. And a lot of times I'm just working with the family to figure out when things are scheduled and trying to make it all work.
I do want to add to that. when we talk about a cosigner on a non-federal loan, typically it is a parent, but it doesn't, for some loans, it doesn't have to be. It can be grandma or grandpa or aunt, uncle. We've even had, although we don't necessarily like this because the boyfriend of the student does it or something. We don't like that. But my point being, it doesn't have to be the parent. A grandparent, somebody else could co-sign that loan too.
Great. So the last thing that I want to make sure that we share with people tonight is contact information. So people are more than welcome to call. Deb made a really clear conversation with you about the fact that you do not have to borrow from VSAC in order to call us for advice. So we help people regardless of who they've borrowed from, regardless of where they are in the process. If you have questions about student loans, you should feel free to call us. And we would always say to you, call your lender. Your lender wants you to be as successful repaying that loan as you want to be. So they're really invested in your success, and not calling your lender is probably one of the biggest mistakes we see families and students make when they are concerned about their ability to repay. So definitely calling the school, calling the lender is really important. But to reach VSAC, we have a number of pieces up here. So info@vsac.org, you can email us your questions there, and we are happy to answer them. You can call us on our toll-free number, which is 1-800-226-1029. And Deb has provided her email address at VSAC. So if you want to speak to her personally, you can certainly email her. Greg Davis can be reached at Champlain College, and the number is on the screen. It's 802-865-5435. He also can be emailed at gdavis@champlain.edu. So lots of ways. And one of our questions, Greg, was, can we call Greg directly tomorrow and ask a question? So people are already thinking about how to get back in touch with you. Let's see, we've got a couple of new questions since I started that, and we've got a few minutes, so I'm certainly gonna go ahead and ask them of you. We've been offered a tuition refund plan, which essentially is essentially insurance that returns your tuition if you must leave a term early. So it sounds a little bit like, I don't know, flight insurance if you end up not taking your trip. Do you recommend this, and how does that factor into repayment of money that was borrowed through a student loan?
The college I work for, Champlain College, does offer a tuition insurance plan. What we typically advise families to do is, well, I'll go back to the first part of it. So they're becoming a little bit more common. At first, if you think of a student that might have had health issues or concerns where a family, wanted to send them off but wasn't completely positive, it gave them the ability to know that if the student did have to leave the term early, they'd get some of their tuition money back. I would say in this COVID-19 days, I wouldn't be surprised if more families aren't considering this type of insurance. And what it is, and you should check the college's website, because all colleges have a sliding scale. So if you leave within the first 2 weeks of classes, you might get refunded 90% of tuition. If you leave after 6 weeks, you might get refunded 50% of tuition. So you're going to want to check the college's website first, because colleges build that in to begin with. The tuition refund plan just guarantees you the rest of the money. And how it typically works is they're just going to send you a check for the differences. So if we awarded dispersed a $10,000 loan for the fall semester, and your son or daughter has to leave early, you're getting that check. So what you want to remember to do is you probably want to send that check along to the lender to pay down that loan. We're not going to adjust the financial aid award because we charged you $20,000, you took out a $10,000 loan. You're just getting money from the insurance plan like you would from a health insurance or a dental insurance, thing like that.
So it's still up to the parents to, or student, to repay the student loan. The student obligation from signing that promissory note will still be in play, and yes, the money has to come from the family.
Correct.
Okay. This one actually is to me. If we appealed the VSAC grant and got a new award, when will it reflect on the Vermont State College System website? And should we notify our school? And I'm not sure if that really was supposed to be the Vermont State College website or if that's supposed to be VSAC's website. So once you have, if you appeal, and let me just back up a little bit. About a month ago, we did a whole webinar on how to appeal your financial aid. So families whose financial situation has changed since they first filled out those FAFSAs, or since the information that they had to provide on the FAFSA has changed. So when you fill out the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, you are using your 2018 income. And as many of us know, the 2020 year for a lot of families, especially here in Vermont, looks very different than it did in 2018. And so VSAC has funds that allow us to increase a family's award, and most colleges do as well, if the family's financial situation has changed. So we encourage students and parents, if your income situation or your financial strength is less today than it was based on your 2018 income, please let us know. And families are writing to us and they're filling out paperwork and documentation to show us what's going on in their situation. If we determine that you are eligible for additional grant dollars, and so far those determinations have been made for over 400 families, so it's worth really thinking about this. But if we do determine that, we will send a notification to you that your award has been updated, and you can go into your online state grant account by using your My VSAC Access information, and you will see your new award there. And we will also notify your school that your award has increased. So both you and your school will be notified if your award is increased based on an appeal.
And I'd just like to add that if you are in one of those situations, reach out to your school as well, because they may be able to help you with increased institutional aid and possibly adjust the FAFSA for increased federal aid.
Agreed, absolutely. Then I have a question here that says, I'm not sure I heard this correctly, but did someone say that the VSAC loans to out-of-state students? Yes, you did hear that VSAC is limited in who we can loan to, but VSAC can lend to a Vermont resident going to school in or out of state, or an out-of-state student who attends a Vermont institution. If that is true, would it be beneficial for parents to contact the student aid entities in the state that their kids are going to school? You know, I think that's absolutely fine. You should, again, we are going to encourage you every time, shop for the best rate. So check with the state you're going to and check with VSAC, check with other entities. It's really important to find the loan that best meets the needs of you, your family, and your student.
And not every state has a state loan, just so families know.
A good point, Greg. Not all states have state loan programs. So we're back to that whole idea of shopping, and some of that shopping is actually going on the website and looking at the loan product, but some of it is just determining who has a loan product. Not all agencies have loan products, not all states do, not all schools offer private loans. So you really do have to look around. And again, Greg mentioned earlier, a number of schools offer what's called preferred lender lists, although not all of them do, but they may also give you some information about the lenders that their students are most likely to have used. All right, I think we are right on time this evening. I really want to thank everyone who joined us. Again, the contact information for us is up on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to VSAC. That is exactly what we were created for, is to help Vermont families have the information they need to successfully go on to training or education beyond high school. And certainly you can reach out to Greg, who has been a wonderful expert with us tonight. I'd like to thank both Deb and Greg for joining us. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. and good evening.